All right, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack the completely merciless, unforgiving pressure cooker that is World Cup qualification. You know, whether we're talking about the tight, super exclusive formats of the past or the massive, sprawling iterations we're seeing today, the stakes are absolutely always impossibly high. Today, we're going to analyze the wild evolution of this qualification process, look at some of the shocking casualties along the way, and highlight the spectacular underdog stories that make this tournament the greatest spectacle on Earth.
Section 1. A Moment of Madness. Let's get into it.
So, to truly wrap our heads around the psychological weight of World Cup qualification, we kind of have to drop right into a moment of pure intense panic. We're traveling back to November 17th, 1993. It's a fateful match between France and Bulgaria. Let's walk through this timeline together because it brilliantly illustrates how quickly a dream can just turn into an absolute nightmare. Okay, so going into their final group match, France has this incredibly talented squad. They literally just need to avoid defeat to book their ticket to the 1994 World Cup in the US. At 31 minutes, Eric Cantona gives France the lead. Great. 6 minutes later, Emil Kostadinov equalizes for Bulgaria. Okay, it's getting tense, but 1-1 is still enough for France. Then, we hit the 90th minute. French substitute David Ginola gets the ball from a short free kick deep in the Bulgarian half. Now, instead of just holding the ball by the corner flag to run down the clock, which is, the standard safe play, Ginola decides to try and beat his man. He whips this wild, heavily overhit cross into the box where Cantona is the only Frenchman. The Bulgarians mock up the loose ball, instantly launch a blistering counterattack, and in stoppage time, Kostadinov scores from an impossible angle. 2-1 Bulgaria. France is out. Just like that.
But the absolutely crucial takeaway here is the bitter aftermath of that single split-second decision. French manager Gérard Houllier actually resigned over the failure, but he laid the blame squarely and very publicly right at the feet of David Ginola. He went on record saying he sent an Exocet missile through the heart of French football and committed a crime against the team. I mean, wow. The psychological toll of that one cross haunted French football for years. Ginola was a massive star for Paris Saint-Germain at the time, but he was so stung by the public vilification that he seriously considered retiring. He eventually just had to flee the toxicity of French football entirely, going on to have a legendary, kind of redemptive career at Newcastle United over in England. It just shows you, the pressure of qualification can literally alter the trajectory of a career in the blink of an eye.
Moving on to Section 2, the 48-team illusion.
Let's fast forward to the present day. Now, you might be thinking that with all the modernization of the sport, that immense suffocating pressure from 1993 might have eased up a bit. But the reality? It hasn't. It's just taken on a completely new shape. 48. That is the sheer unprecedented scale of the 2026 tournament spanning the US, Canada, and Mexico. We're looking at a setup boasting 16 more slots than any previous edition in the history of the competition. It's just a massive expansion, designed to bring way more of the globe into the fold.
Which naturally begs the question, did this huge expansion actually make qualification easier? Logically, you'd assume that 16 extra spots would act as a massive safety net for the traditional footballing powers. But the reality on the ground? It actually intensified global competition. Suddenly, way more teams believed they had a realistic shot of making it, and that led to incredibly tight qualification groups and some wildly unpredictable outcomes all over the globe.
Which brings us to Section 3, Giants Missing the Cut.
Look at this chaos. Instead of established nations just coasting through the qualifiers like you might expect, we witnessed an absolute bloodbath. There's this huge, stark contrast right now between a team's historical reputation and their current reality. Look at the board. We've got Italy, ranked 12th in the entire world, Denmark, ranked 20th, Cameroon, ranked 45th, and an absolute undisputed giant of African football. Every single one of them failed to qualify, even with all those extra available spots. It just goes to show, historical reputation alone, it doesn't guarantee you a ticket anymore. You literally can't just rely on the badge on your jersey. You got to perform match after match.
Let's zoom in on Italy for a second, because this is honestly the most staggering absence of the bunch. We're talking about a 4-time World Cup champion, the Euro 2020 winner, and they are missing their 3rd consecutive World Cup. The Italian media literally called it the third apocalypse. Despite dropping points in what should have been super manageable fixtures against North Macedonia and Northern Ireland, they managed to scrape into a playoff against Bosnia. And then, they suffered a catastrophic 4-1 defeat, and they did this in what was only newly appointed coach Gennaro Gattuso's 8th game in charge. It's wild. This really highlights some deep structural issues within Italian football right now. We're talking a severe lack of cutting-edge youth development and a real struggle to produce world-class attacking players. So yeah, Global superstars like Gianluigi Donnarumma and Nicolo Barella, they're going to be watching from the couch.
And it definitely wasn't just Italy. Take Denmark. They entered this cycle as one of Europe's most organized defensive teams, but they dropped key points, ended up firing their coach Kasper Hillemund, and suffered crippling injuries to major stars like Christensen and Poulsen before finally losing a dramatic penalty shootout to Czechia. Meanwhile, you have Cameroon, who totally set the 2022 World Cup alight. They fell victim to some really deep internal conflicts between their federation president Samuel Eto'o and head coach Mark Breik. When you combine that kind of instability with the notoriously ruthless, marginless nature of African qualifiers, well, an incredibly storied nation, along with world-class players like Andre Onana, just gets completely left on the sidelines.
All right, Section 4, Miracles and Debutantes.
But hey, as is always the case with sports, the heartbreak of the fallen giants creates the perfect space for incredible underdog stories. This comparison right here perfectly captures the pure magic of this tournament. On the left side, you've got Italy, 59 million people, a massive, historic footballing infrastructure, 4-time champions. And they're sitting out. On the right side, Curaçao, a population of just 156,000 people. Through the absolute heroics of striker Rangelo Djonga and goalkeeper Eloy Room, they have actually become the smallest nation in history to ever qualify for a World Cup. I mean, it completely defies logic, and honestly, it's just wonderful to see.
And those unlikely triumphs, they don't stop there. Take Sweden, for example. They finished dead last in their European qualifying group. Last. But they managed to navigate this incredibly complex Nations League playoff lifeline, eventually rallying in stoppage time to beat Poland 3-2. Wild. Then you have Uzbekistan securing their debut appearance under the guidance of, wait for it, Fabio Cannavaro, the captain of Italy's 2006 World Cup winning team. The irony there is just palpable. We're also seeing historic first-ever appearances from Cape Verde and Jordan, while Congo is making a highly emotional return to the global stage after a 52-year absence. So the expansion did exactly what it promised here. It blew the doors wide open for entirely new narratives.
Section 5, Beyond the Pitch.
Now, pulling off a massive tournament with 48 nations spanning 3 huge North American countries requires looking way beyond just the pitch. We are seeing a really complex intersection of geopolitics and logistics play out. For instance, you've got the Iranian national team. Their domestic league is actually suspended right now amid ongoing conflict, but they qualified, and they're scheduled to play their group stage games in Los Angeles and Seattle. That is a huge diplomatic test for FIFA. Logistically, to handle the massive influx of fans from newly qualified nations like Iraq, they've implemented this expedited FIFA Pass visa system, which was championed by U.S. President Donald Trump. But then, on the flip side of that coin, many African fans are facing incredibly prohibitive hurdles, like massive visa bonds, up to $15,000 just required to attend. So while the playing field on the pitch may have expanded, the barriers off it remain highly complex.
Which brings us to our final thought for today. The format has expanded, the logistics are an absolute labyrinth, and the roster of teams is more diverse than it's ever been. But the core of World Cup qualification, that remains entirely unchanged. It is still an agonizing, beautiful pressure cooker. So in a tournament of 48 nations, where reputations mean absolutely nothing and the margins are razor thin, who's going to be the next giant to fall? Who's going to crumble under that same unforgiving pressure David Ginola felt back in 1993? And who is going to rise up and become a legend? That right there is the beautiful unpredictability of this game. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.